In this video, I'm going to show you how I built this mid-century inspired cherry dining table with a removable leaf. The chair I used for the tabletop and aprons was all rough, so I started by taking it to my joiner sled at the table saw and ripping a straight edge on all the boards. Then I took everything to the planer and I milled it down to just over 3/4 of an inch. I took all the boards back over to the table saw and I ripped them to their final width. I'm trimming all the boards to a manageable length, but I'm leaving a little extra on the ends to be trimmed down later. Here I'm just deciding which face of each board looks best to be the presentation side, and laying out all the boards to figure out which way I want the grain to flow. I'm going to use biscuits to join all the boards together. So here I am cutting the first biscuit slot and then repeating that process down all the edges. I'm starting my glue up. On this first board, I tried the piece that comes with the glue bot that lets you straddle a piece of wood. I think it's called the Glue Edging Guide. But ultimately, I didn't find it very useful, so I just switched back to the regular tip and did the old squeeze it and spread it method. Each board gets glue on their edges and down in the biscuit slots. When biscuits come in contact with glue, they actually soak up some of the moisture of the glue and it causes them to expand, and you get a much tighter fit when that happens. While the tabletop dries, I start working on the legs, which was originally 8/4 cherry that I planed down to 1.5 inches. And here I'm just ripping down the legs a little bit wider than they're going to end up being. The outside angle on the legs is going to be 5 degrees. Once I add a taper to the inside angle, it'll end up being about 6.5 degrees. So here I'm just cutting the top and bottom of the legs at 5 degrees. This is a tapering jig that I made. It makes it really easy to rip angles on a long piece using a table saw. Now that the table's dry, I'm using a card scraper to smooth out the surface, particularly on those glue joints. I went over the whole top with a card scraper. It gets it smooth and really cuts down on sanding time later. I wanted to add a slight curve on the ends of the table, so here I'm making a drawing bow. This is my first time experimenting with this, and it turned out pretty good after some tweaking. I'm getting this cord as tight as I can. So I start by inserting a piece of scrap wood under the cord to create this curve, but the angle was a little too wide, so I just took it over my chop saw and shortened it a little. It was still a bit too wide, so I took a couple more inches off, and this ended up being perfect. I'm creating a template that I can later use with a flush trim bit and a router to create the curves in the tabletop. I made a rough cut on the bandsaw just to get most of the material removed, and then took it to the belt sander to smooth it out. This lumber had quite a few cracks and small holes, so I'm filling it with some epoxy that I mixed with a couple drops of caramel color and 1 drop of red, just to try to get it close to the cherry. And here I am with the heat gun, just popping some of those bubbles on the surface. I used a jigsaw to take off the majority of the material for those curves on the corners, and then I used my plunge router to trim them up. This was the scariest part of this build for me. I'm cutting the top into 3 pieces. Only really get 1 shot to do it right. This was also my first time using this track saw that I just got from Win, and it did pretty good. I did get a little bit of tear out at the end that I had to patch later, but overall I was pretty happy with it. I made a shallow pass first, going down about half the depth of the table, and then I came back and cut all the way through. And then I repeated this 1 more time. I'm adding a small chamfer all the way around both pieces of the tabletop and the leaf. I think it looks a little cleaner when the leaf goes in and the table meets up as 1 piece, which you'll see in a little bit. Now on to sanding. This was my 3rd pass sanding. I actually started at 80 grit, and then I worked my way up from 120, 150, 180, and then finished at 220, making sure to really remove all the dust in between the grits. I'm using my self-centering dowel jig to cut out some holes for the alignment pins that'll help the leaf slide into place. Here I'm just doing a dry fit to make sure everything lines up okay. Not bad. Now I'm cutting up the aprons, because part of the apron will actually attach to the leaf. And it's assembly time for the table base. I'm using pocket hole joinery for most of the base. I didn't film myself cutting the pocket holes, but you can see where they are. I had already done a full dry assembly, so you can see where the screw holes are that had already gone through, and that was really helpful with alignment when I put it back together for the final time. I'm using the straw trick to clean up my glue squeeze out. It's a remarkably effective way to get rid of glue in those hard to reach spots. In order to use the slides that I'm using, I need to first assemble the table in its smallest form without the leaf. The slides allow the table to expand and the leaf to go in. These are made by Osborne Wood Products, and they worked out really well. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check them out. This was the big moment of truth for me. You can see me raise my hands in celebration. These things slid so well, I was very impressed. Everything fit together really nicely. And that was it. Time to move on to the finish. I'm using General Finishes Armor Seal in satin. The first coat I put on really thick, and then I let that soak in and dry for about a day. And then I came back and sanded that lightly by hand with 600 grit. And then I put another coat on, let that dry for about 6 hours. And then I repeated that process 2 more times for a total of 4 coats. You want to let this stuff cure for at least a few days. The more time, the better. And once I did, I came back and I just hit it with a brown paper bag to knock down any dust that might have settled on the surface for a really nice, super smooth finish. And that's it. Time for delivery. I hope you enjoyed watching this and seeing the process. It was an interesting challenge for me. It was my first time putting a leaf in a table, and I'm really happy with how everything turned out.